Have you ever had that strange feeling of experiencing something that, somehow, has already happened before? A seemingly ordinary moment, a conversation, a place, an image, that suddenly gives you the intense impression that you've already lived it? If so, you're not alone. This experience, known as "have you seen it," is one of the most intriguing and mysterious sensations that the human brain can produce. The most curious thing is that, despite being incredibly common, we still know very little about what actually causes this phenomenon. It is estimated that more than 60% of people have experienced it at least once in their lives, and yet each episode of déjà vu seems so intimate, so personal, that it makes us wonder if there is something deeper behind it. Is it a glitch in the brain? A poorly stored memory? Or perhaps a glimpse of something that hasn't even happened yet? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover could change the way you understand how your own brain works. Let's delve into the real science behind déjà vu. No mysticism, just plenty of scientific curiosity and surprising discoveries. The sensation of déjà vu usually happens in the blink of an eye. It doesn't last more than a few seconds, but it leaves an intense mark. It's as if the brain is playing a trick on you, making you believe you've experienced it before, even though you know rationally that it's not possible. And it is precisely this conflict between intuition and logic that has fascinated neuroscientists for decades. Many associate déjà vu with supernatural experiences, theories of reincarnation, or even parallel realities. But is there a more concrete explanation based on what science has already discovered about the human mind? Spoiler alert. Yes, there is, and it involves specific areas of the brain, momentary glitches in memory processing, and perhaps even evolutionary mechanisms that we are still trying to understand. Throughout this video, we will explore together not only what déjà vu is, but also the most consistent theories about its origin, what recent studies have revealed, and why some people experience it more frequently than others. And more. Did you know that there are other similar brain phenomena such as "I never saw" or "the almost seen," which also challenge our perception of reality? But don't worry, everything in its own time. What you're about to hear goes far beyond what's usually said. We're going to decode, step by step, how the brain stores memories, what can go wrong in this process, and how this might be directly linked to that strange shiver of "I've seen this before." And if you've ever wondered if these moments of déjà vu hide a greater truth about who you are, or about the very workings of your mind, then you're in the right place. Take a deep breath, prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew about your memory, and stick with me, because in the next part we're going to delve into the more real and scientific mysteries of this fascinating phenomenon. What if I told you that your brain, even when it's functioning well, can create illusions so convincing that they make you question reality? Déjà vu is one of those things. It's like an internal echo, a reflection of something that may never have happened, but that, for a moment, seems as real as what you're experiencing now. And that's exactly why this topic resonates so deeply with us. It's not just science, it's also emotion, identity, memory. Each person experiences déjà vu differently. Some are intrigued, some are scared, some are simply fascinated. So, if this subject resonates with you, if you've ever had one of these inexplicable moments, share it in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experience, where you were, what you felt, if you've ever tried to understand why it happens. Your story might even appear in a future video. By the way, if you're enjoying this dive into the mysteries of the human brain, leave a like right now. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it shows that it's worthwhile to continue producing this type of content, with research, care, and a lot of curiosity. And if you're new here, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Then, in addition to being part of this community of curious minds, you'll be notified whenever a new video full of discoveries like this one comes out. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who, like you, love to question, explore, and learn. This space is made for you, and with you. And speaking of learning, now that we've felt the impact of the phenomenon, it's time to understand what really happens in the brain during an episode of Déjà Vu. Because, yes, science has some answers, and they are as fascinating as they are unexpected. Déjà vu is one of those phenomena that makes you stop for a second and think, what was that? A feeling as intense as it is inexplicable, that arises from nowhere and disappears almost as quickly as it arrived, leaving behind only a trail of doubt and curiosity. The expression itself comes from French, déjà vu, and literally means already seen. And this name is no coincidence. Anyone who has experienced it knows exactly what it's like. A sudden impression of having already lived that moment in that place with those same words, gestures, sounds. Everything seems familiar but at the same time completely new. But what exactly is déjà vu? What lies behind this experience that blends memory, perception, and emotion in an instant? That's where we begin to enter fascinating territory, where neuroscience meets psychology and sometimes even philosophy. Although the term was popularized in the 19th century, it is believed that accounts of similar experiences have existed for a long time. Ancient civilizations attempted to explain this phenomenon through myths, spirituality, or even connections to other lives. Today, with advances in science and technology, we have tools to look at the brain like never before, and yet, déjà vu remains one of the greatest enigmas of the human mind. Studies show that around 60% to 70% of people have experienced at least one episode of déjà vu in their lives. It's more common among young adults, especially those between 15 and 25 years old, and tends to decrease over time. Interestingly, it's more frequent in people with higher levels of education or who travel a lot, perhaps because they are constantly exposed to new stimuli, which increases the chances of creating unconscious associations with old memories. And this raises an important question. Is déjà vu a kind of malfunction in the memory system? Or is it exactly the opposite, a sign that the brain is functioning in an incredibly complex and sensitive way? For some scientists, déjà vu may be a kind of brain short circuit, a momentary error in the memory encoding process, where the brain confuses the present with something that has already been stored before, even if it didn't actually happen. It's as if, for a fraction of a second, the brain puts the perception of the present moment in the wrong drawer, treating it as a memory. This can happen because the areas of the brain responsible for recognizing familiarity and those that store real memories don't work at exactly the same time. A slight mismatch between these systems can make us feel like we've already seen something that is actually happening for the first time. And this explanation is just the beginning. Déjà vu can also be linked to states of fatigue, stress, or even the consumption of certain medications. Some researchers suggest that it is more common in people who have a greater capacity for imagination or creativity. There are also interesting connections with meditation, mindfulness, and other mindfulness practices, which leads us to think about the role of attention and perception in memory formation. In certain cases, recurring episodes of déjà vu may also be related to neurological disorders, such as temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition that has been studied to try to better understand the inner workings of this mysterious phenomenon. The truth is that the experience of déjà vu forces us to think about how the mind works in a different way. It's not just about old memories or processing errors. It may be linked to something deeper, to how we perceive time, to how the brain interprets the present based on past patterns. It could be, for example, a natural attempt by the brain to predict what will happen next. This connects the phenomenon to the idea that the human mind is not only reactive but also predictive. We are always anticipating the next step based on what we have already experienced, which gives us an evolutionary advantage, and sometimes strange illusions like déjà vu. It's fascinating to think that this phenomenon might be a reflection of our brain in high-performance mode. The mind is constantly comparing what we see, hear, and feel with everything we've already experienced, in an almost automatic effort to find patterns and make predictions. And if the new experience is too similar to another already stored, even unconsciously, the memory system can trigger this internal alarm: you've been through this before. But have we really? Another important point is the role of emotions in constructing this sensation. An emotionally charged environment, whether positive or negative, can intensify the feeling of familiarity. Sometimes, it's not the place itself, nor the conversation, but what we feel at that moment that makes us believe that that moment already existed. Emotions and memories are deeply intertwined, and this causes déjà vu to act as an emotional echo, bringing to the surface something we cannot identify, but which intensely marks us. It's also worth considering the connection between déjà vu and our sense of identity. After all, if our personal history is built upon the memories we hold, what place does a false or illusory memory occupy? Is déjà vu a mistake, or a revelation about how human consciousness truly works? For many experts, the answer lies in understanding the inner workings of these mental processes, what happens beyond our conscious perception, but which shapes every decision, every feeling, every memory. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the way the brain registers, encodes, and retrieves memories can hide surprising revelations. And it is at this point that we begin to realize that déjà vu may only be the tip of the iceberg. If everything around us is filtered by this internal system of memories, emotions, and experiences, are we ever truly living in the present as it is? Comment below, this makes sense to me. I'd love to know who's on this journey with me. Have you ever noticed how, when someone mentions déjà vu, explanations that blend the mystical, the supernatural, and even science fiction almost always emerge? It seems this phenomenon has the power to unlock all sorts of creative theories, and many of them are quite popular even without any scientific evidence behind them. Perhaps the most common of all is the idea that déjà vu is a memory of a past life. Many people believe that, when they feel they have already lived a certain moment, they are actually accessing memories of a previous existence. It's an old idea rooted in various spiritual traditions and Eastern religions, and one that still fascinates those who feel there is something greater behind this sensation. The curious thing is that, despite there being no concrete proof of reincarnation, this hypothesis survives because it touches on a deep emotion, the desire to continue to exist beyond the present time. Another classic theory is that of premonitions. In this case, déjà vu would be a kind of glimpse into the future, a moment we've seen before in dreams or intuitions and that is now actually happening. It's as if the brain had predicted that scene in advance and, by experiencing it, activated the feeling of familiarity. Many people claim to have dreamed of situations that would only happen days, months, or even years later. The problem is that our dream memory is notoriously unstable and subjective. Sometimes just one detail coinciding, a color, a face, an object, is enough for the brain to fill in the rest and convince us that we've seen it all before. And of course, we have one of the most modern and, shall we say, cinematic explanations, the Matrix theory. That's right, like in the movie. According to this view, déjà vu would be a glitch in reality, a flaw in the code of the simulation in which we are supposedly all immersed. When something changes behind the scenes of reality, we feel déjà vu. This idea has gained traction in recent years, especially with the growth of discussions about virtual realities, computer simulations, and the nature of consciousness. Although there is no tangible evidence that we live in a simulation, the theory continues to fascinate and fuel interesting conversations about what reality actually is. Some even link déjà vu to parallel dimensions. The theory states that with each decision we make, a new alternative reality is created. And déjà vu would be a crossing between two of these timelines, a point of contact where your current consciousness briefly tunes in with that of a version of yourself in another dimension who has already lived that exact moment. The idea is intriguing, almost poetic. And although it is widely explored in fiction, it lacks scientific support. Even so, who hasn't thought, what if this feeling is really an echo of another self, living another reality? But even with all these alternative explanations, it's important to understand what they all have in common: the attempt to make sense of the unknown. It's natural, the human brain hates not having answers. When something defies logic, we look for symbols, narratives, myths that can fill that gap. And déjà vu, being so difficult to predict, measure, or study in real time, becomes the ideal terrain for these constructions. It's like a blank space where everyone projects whatever they want. Mystery, spirituality, or even a philosophical theory disguised as science fiction. These popular beliefs, while lacking empirical basis, help us understand how we deal with the unknown. They reveal much more about our mindset than about the phenomenon itself. They show how much we need structures to organize chaos, to make us feel in control, even when faced with an experience as brief and disorienting as déjà vu. And that, in itself, is fascinating. Furthermore, these alternative interpretations also reflect our cultural values. In more religious societies, the most common explanation tends to be spiritual. In more technological contexts, hypotheses emerge as glitches in the simulation. In other words, the type of response we give to this mystery says a lot about the time in which we live. In a hyper-connected world, where everything seems to have an immediate explanation, déjà vu is an unsettling reminder that not everything can be simply rationalized. It's worth remembering that these theories, however bizarre or exaggerated they may seem, have their role. They awaken our curiosity, open up space for conversations, and make us look inward. Often, it is through these improbable ideas that the most transformative questions arise. What is consciousness? Where does memory begin and end? What is the impact of what we cannot explain on how we make decisions? All of this is part of a personal and collective journey that goes beyond the simple experience of déjà vu and touches on an essential point of our existence: the search for meaning. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because behind all these popular interpretations, there is a search for truth, a desire to understand the impact this phenomenon has on our consciousness and our decisions. And that's where science comes in. Because, however creative and interesting these ideas may be, neuroscience has been uncovering real clues about what actually happens in the brain during an episode of déjà vu. And as you will see, the behind-the-scenes aspects of this experience hide much more than simple curiosity. Write this down: I'm on this journey too, if these theories have ever crossed your mind. After exploring so many fascinating possibilities and popular theories, it's time to look at what science really has to say about déjà vu. Because, despite being a brief and difficult-to-predict phenomenon, neuroscience has been studying it with increasing interest. and the discoveries made so far are as surprising as they are revealing. To understand what happens in the brain during an episode of déjà vu, it's necessary to first understand how the memory process works. Our brain is constantly receiving and interpreting sensory information. Images, sounds, smells, tactile sensations, emotions. All of this goes through an incredibly complex system of data storage, categorization, and retrieval. And two of the main protagonists in this process are the temporal lobe and the hippocampus. The temporal lobe, located on the sides of the brain, is responsible for functions such as pattern recognition, language comprehension, and, of course, memory formation. The hippocampus, located within the temporal lobe, acts as a kind of memory center, organizing incoming data and deciding what will be stored as short-term or long-term memory. It helps connect what we are experiencing now with what we have experienced before. And it is precisely in this connection between present and past that the most accepted explanation for déjà vu comes in: a synchronization failure between memory systems. Imagine that, for some reason, new information is processed as if it were an old memory. Your brain recognizes that scene as familiar, even though you know rationally that you have never experienced it before. It's as if the present were filed in the wrong place. And, for a moment, what is happening is interpreted as a memory that has resurfaced. This glitch can occur when there is a temporary and slightly uncoordinated activation between short-term and long-term memory circuits. Under normal conditions, we first register the event and only then compare it with our previous memories. But in déjà vu, this process can happen in reverse, or simultaneously. The result? An intense feeling of familiarity without context, without explanation. Some researchers believe that this incoordination may be caused by small delays in transmission between different brain regions. It's as if the areas responsible for perception and memory are not perfectly aligned, creating a kind of neurological echo, a duplicated reflection of the present moment. And because the brain is a machine that constantly seeks patterns, it interprets this duplication as something that already happened. It's important to understand that this phenomenon is not a sign of serious brain disease or malfunction. In fact, most healthy people have experienced déjà vu and continue to live normally. However, there are studies that link more frequent or intense episodes to the medial temporal lobe, especially in people with mild forms of epilepsy. In these cases, abnormal electrical activity in this region can induce feelings of intense familiarity, even before a seizure, for example. These studies have greatly helped to map what happens neurologically when déjà vu manifests. Another interesting line of research involves the use of virtual reality to simulate environments that subtly mimic spaces or contexts already familiar to participants. When exposed to these scenarios, some report déjà vu experiences, even knowing they have never been there. This reinforces the idea that the brain can be induced to recognize patterns and attribute familiarity to them even in completely new situations, provided there are sufficient similarities to previous experiences. And here's where something very important comes in: the way the brain processes details. Déjà vu can arise not because the situation is identical to something we've experienced, but because a set of small elements, light, layout of space, temperature, facial expressions, activates a network of associations similar to another memory already stored. In other words, it's not the complete moment that repeats itself, but the invisible structure that your brain identifies as similar. This phenomenon reveals how dependent we are on memory to construct our perception of reality. The brain is not just a repository of memories, it is constantly comparing what we see and feel with everything we have already experienced. When the comparison is too precise or too quick, the system cheats and produces that strange feeling of déjà vu. It's a small error, yes, but an error that reveals a hidden truth about how we live in the present. It is never completely new, it is always interpreted in light of what we have already experienced. And this has profound implications for our mindset and even our decisions. If the brain is capable of transforming a new experience into a false memory, what other interpretations might it be distorting without us realizing it? The experience of déjà vu is a reminder that our perception is constructed, not directly perceived, and that, behind every sensation, there is a sophisticated system of analyses, connections, and comparisons that operate behind the scenes of the mind, often without our conscious control. Thinking about this invites us to reflect on the journey of human consciousness. How did we evolve to create such refined mechanisms that simultaneously protect and confuse us? What impact does this constant filtering of reality have on how we experience the world, relate to others, or make important decisions? Each episode of déjà vu, however brief, touches a vulnerable point in the mind, and can even be interpreted as an opening, a fissure, through which a broader understanding of human experience peaks. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. because understanding how the brain deals with time, continuity, and perception can reveal unexpected connections between memory, identity, and reality. Comment below. This makes sense to me, if this explanation opened up new perspectives for you on how your mind works. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we explore the scientific background of déjà vu, we begin to realize how rich, surprising, and sometimes counterintuitive the reality of our own brain can be. And more than that, we discover how science has been seriously and precisely trying to give shape to a phenomenon that for a long time was treated only as a curiosity or superstition. For decades, déjà vu was seen as something merely subjective. A fleeting moment, difficult to reproduce, impossible to measure. And this, naturally, made it a huge challenge for scientific research. After all, how do you study a phenomenon that cannot be provoked on demand? How do you observe the brain in real time while it believes it is remembering something that never happened? It was only with the advancement of neuroscience and brain mapping technologies that some doors began to open. One of the first concrete steps came from the study of patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. During focal seizures, many of these patients reported intense episodes of déjà vu just before the seizures. This raised the hypothesis that certain abnormal electrical discharges in the temporal lobe might be associated with the feeling of unjustified familiarity. Researchers noted that, by artificially stimulating certain brain regions during neurological surgeries, patients reported experiences identical to déjà vu, even while conscious and lucid. This allowed for a novel observation. There were specific areas of the brain where déjà vu could be switched on, like a light switch. According to neuroscientists at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom, déjà vu can be experimentally induced by a technique called false familiarity response. In one of the most intriguing experiments, researchers presented participants with a list of semantically related words, such as bed, pillow, sheets, blanket, but without including the keyword sleep. Later, when testing their memory, many volunteers stated with conviction that the word sleep was part of the original list. This effect, known as false recognition, helps explain how the brain, when searching for patterns, can confuse strong associations with real memories. Another groundbreaking study used virtual reality to explore the triggers of déjà vu. Participants were placed in carefully manipulated virtual environments, with structures and visual elements that vaguely resembled previously seen locations. Even without having visited the new spaces, many reported that unmistakable feeling of having been here before. These tests reinforced the idea that déjà vu may result from familiar details rearranged in new contexts, deceiving the brain's recognition system. Furthermore, research points to a link between déjà vu and working memory function. In moments of fatigue, stress, or excessive cognitive stimulation, the brain may resort to shortcuts, mixing present perceptions with poorly consolidated memory fragments. This would be particularly common in people with high information processing capacity or with cognitive profiles more sensitive to patterns. It's interesting to note that déjà vu doesn't seem to be linked solely to memory itself, but to the memory verification process. In other words, it's not that the brain remembers something specific, but that, for milliseconds, it believes it has recognized something. This verification system can fail, especially when areas like the frontal cortex are unable to block or correct erroneous interpretations generated by the limbic system, where familiarity is evaluated. It's as if the brain says, "This looks familiar," and the rest of the mind believes it even without proof. A study published in the journal Neuroscience Letters, the researchers used functional magnetic resonance imaging techniques to monitor brain activity during tasks involving recognition and familiarity. The results showed that, during episodes of déjà vu, there is simultaneous activation in regions linked to conscious processing and the detection of internal conflicts, especially in the prefrontal cortex. This suggests that déjà vu may actually be a sophisticated way for the brain to signal that something doesn't add up, even if the origin of this sensation is unclear. This type of discovery completely changes our perception of the phenomenon. Instead of a simple illusion or glitch, déjà vu may represent a cognitive safety function, a kind of internal alarm that alerts us to possible discrepancies between what we perceive and what we actually experience. It's as if the brain were saying, "Wait a minute, there's something strange here." And this has fascinating implications for understanding consciousness. Moreover, one of the most recent hypotheses argues that déjà vu may be a positive side effect of a healthy memory system. Instead of being a malfunction, it may be a sign that the brain is functioning well, constantly alert, comparing information, testing hypotheses, seeking coherence. In younger people, this system appears more active, which explains the higher frequency of déjà vu among teenagers and adults up to the age of 30. Over time, as the memory verification system becomes more rigid or selective, the frequency tends to decrease. All this shows that déjà vu, despite remaining shrouded in mystery, is far from being just a curiosity. It can offer valuable clues about how we organize our past, interpret the present, and make decisions that shape our future. Science is far from having all the answers, but advances already allow us to see this phenomenon with different eyes, not as something supernatural, but as a window into the inner workings of the human mind. And when we consider the complexity of this process, the layers of perception, memory, interpretation, emotion, we realize that déjà vu is more than just a strange moment. It's a reminder that we aren't always fully aware of the internal decisions our brain makes, that there are hidden truths in the way we feel, remember, and recognize the world around us, and that every moment lived is the result of a silent dance between past, present, and expectation. Comment below, this makes sense to me, if this part of science left you with even more questions than answers. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because although déjà vu is the best-known phenomenon, it is not the only one in this intriguing universe of mind tricks. In fact, our brain is capable of generating other very similar, and equally mysterious, experiences that also involve distortions in how we perceive time, memory, and reality. And understanding these other phenomena helps us not only to broaden our understanding but also to realize how much more complex the human mind is than it seems. Let's start with déjà vu, which in French means already lived. At first glance, it may seem synonymous with déjà vu, but there is a subtle and profound difference. While déjà vu is a momentary and isolated sensation of familiarity, déjà vu involves the conviction that everything happening has already been experienced before in all its details. It's as if the person is absolutely certain that they are reliving an entire experience, not just a fragment. The most curious thing is that some people who experience déjà vu even describe the emotions they felt the first time. It's as if they are inside a repetition of reality, but with full awareness and a strong emotional charge. This phenomenon is frequently associated with certain clinical conditions, such as temporal lobe epilepsy, but it can also appear in contexts of trauma, deep depression, or even altered states of consciousness. In more extreme cases, the person begins to believe that everything they experience has already happened, losing the ability to distinguish the new from the repeated. And this directly affects the sense of novelty, discovery, and, of course, mental balance itself. It's a good example of how a simple failure in perception can have a real impact on our identity and our daily decisions. Then we have jamais vu, which is literally the opposite of déjà vu. The translation from French is never seen, and it occurs when we encounter something extremely familiar, a place, a word, a person, but suddenly feel that it is totally unknown. It's as if something we know intimately is perceived for the first time in a strange, distant, or even disconnected way. Imagine repeating a common word aloud several times, and suddenly that word loses its meaning, as if it were no longer recognizable. That's a mild form of jamais vu. This phenomenon is studied with particular interest by linguists, psychologists, and neurologists because it reveals how excessive repetition, mental fatigue, or even a state of stress can cause short circuits in our connection to what is familiar. In clinical contexts, jamais vu can also appear as a symptom of dissociative or neurological disorders. But even among healthy people, it can happen sporadically and fleetingly, as if the brain, for a moment, disconnects the emotional connection with already known information. And this generates such a strong feeling of strangeness that it can make us uncomfortable. And then there's the lesser-known but equally fascinating, almost seen, meaning almost seen, or on the tip of the tongue. This is that moment when we feel we know something, but we can't fully access the information. It happens a lot with people's names, movie titles, or specific words. You're there, certain you know the answer, but it just doesn't come. It's frustrating but also common. And it shows how our brain stores data in multiple layers, not always immediately accessible. Presque vu is studied as a retrieval memory phenomenon, where information is present, but access to it temporarily fails. Interestingly, the more we try to remember, the harder it seems to become, and it's only when we relax or change the subject that, suddenly, the answer appears out of nowhere. This reveals something fascinating about the inner workings of our minds. We don't always have conscious control over what we know. There are deep mechanisms that regulate the flow of memory, and these mechanisms don't always follow the logic we expect. All these phenomena, déjà vu, jamais vu, and presque vu, are different forms of broken expectations between what we feel, what we remember, and what we experience. They show that our relationship with time and memory is neither linear nor stable. It is subject to flaws, distortions, lapses, and even illusions created by the brain's own architecture. And this opens up space for a broader reflection. To what extent can we trust our perception? To what extent is the reality we experience, in fact, shared, or merely constructed within us? Did you know that some people experience déjà vu almost every day? In many of these cases, the phenomenon is associated with neurological changes, such as in rare syndromes or in the early stages of degenerative diseases. In these situations, déjà vu ceases to be a curious occurrence and becomes an important clinical sign. Studies with these patients have helped scientists better understand the circuits involved in familiarity and memory verification, allowing significant advances in areas such as the early diagnosis of epilepsy or Alzheimer's disease. But even outside the medical field, understanding these experiences offers powerful insights into the human condition. It reveals how vulnerable we are to internal interpretations, how we are always trying to fit the world into our mental frameworks, even if, at times, those frameworks deceive us. It's as if each sensation of familiarity or strangeness is a window to something deeper, a kind of echo of our own way of existing in the world. And perhaps that's the most fascinating point of this journey, realizing that the brain, in its attempt to protect us, to anticipate what will happen, or to associate the new with what we already know, can end up creating realities that don't truly exist, but which, for us, make perfect sense. It's a reminder that the mind is not a mirror of the outside world, it's a filter. And this filter, with all its errors, successes, flaws, and brilliance, is what makes us human. Write this down. I'm on this journey too, if you've ever had any of these experiences and felt like you were questioning everything around you. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after going through popular theories, exploring the inner workings of the brain, and diving into real studies and similar phenomena, we arrive at the point where the essential question needs to be asked. What exactly is déjà vu? Despite all the mystery, the most widely accepted explanation by the scientific community so far is relatively simple, and at the same time profoundly revealing. Déjà vu is probably a momentary glitch in memory and perception. A synchronization error between different areas of the brain responsible for registering, analyzing, and comparing information. In practical terms, it's as if the brain receives a stimulus, interprets that stimulus as something new, but at the same time marks it as familiar. Two responses at the same time. A sensory short circuit that makes you believe you've experienced it before, even knowing it's impossible. But the most incredible thing isn't the error itself. It's what it reveals. Because, for this type of failure to occur, the brain needs to be constantly doing a much more complex job than we imagine. It's not just registering what you see, hear, and feel. It's cross-referencing this information with a vast internal archive, comparing patterns, predicting possible outcomes, and searching for coherence in real time. This requires a level of processing that far surpasses what we usually associate with memory or perception. And that's one of the great revelations of this journey. Déjà vu isn't just a strange phenomenon. It's a window into understanding how our minds truly work. How the brain constructs our perception of reality, moment by moment, based on an invisible network of memories, emotions, references, and interpretations. And how this construction can be affected by milliseconds, by imperceptible details, or by emotional context that we can't always identify. More than that, déjà vu also invites us to reflect on time. Because when we feel that we have already lived this moment, we are not just reacting to a memory lapse, we are experiencing for an instant the collision between past and present. It's as if the brain places us for a second in a space where time is not linear, where the now seems to merge with something that never happened but that, somehow, we feel is true. And there's something profoundly human about that. Because basically we're all searching for meaning. We want what we experience to connect with what we've already felt. We look for patterns, stories, explanations that fit the present into a larger narrative. Déjà vu, by breaking that narrative for a moment, makes us realize that not everything can be controlled, that not every experience is transparent, and that we can't always clearly distinguish what is real from what is interpreted. Even if science advances and manages to technically explain every detail of this phenomenon, there will still be room for mystery. Because the true fascination of déjà vu lies not only in its cause, but in its emotional impact. In the way it disconcerts us, how it makes us stop, take a deep breath and think, what is happening here? It's a reminder that our brain, however incredible it may be, is still a machine full of secrets. And perhaps the most fascinating of all is precisely this. Our consciousness is not an exact mirror of reality, it is a continuous, dynamic creation full of shortcuts, illusions and, yes, brilliant mistakes. The hidden truth is that déjà vu can be one of the few moments when we realize how deeply connected we are to something we don't control, to the invisible structure of our mental functioning. And perhaps that's why it affects us so much. Because it takes us, for a moment, out of our comfort zone. This makes us doubt reality. And in doubt, it opens space for transformation, for new questions, for new ways of seeing the world and seeing ourselves. Therefore, even if the most logical explanation for déjà vu is a memory lapse, it's not just any lapse. It's a lapse that illuminates, that reveals, that shows us that the brain is not just a thinking machine, it's an entire universe still in the process of being discovered. Comment below, this makes sense to me, if you've ever stopped in the middle of a déjà vu and thought, is my brain trying to tell me something? Because maybe I really am. And understanding that is just the beginning of the journey. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this content resonated with you, whether it was curiosity, amazement, or that feeling of discovering something that's always been there, just waiting to be revealed. And if that's the case, then this space is truly for you. If you found this video helpful or inspiring, please give it a like. Not only because it helps the channel, but because it's a way to keep this conversation alive between us. And if you want to continue exploring topics like this, with depth and lightness, consider subscribing to the channel. It will be great to have you here on future journeys. If this topic made you think differently about your own brain, comment below. I'm with you until the end. I want to know who stayed until the very last second of this journey. There's a video over here that complements this topic very well. Click on it and continue watching. There's still so much to discover.